Today we have planned a meeting with Snooker Professional, twice ranking tournament winner Dominic Dale. Dominic Dale's been a friend of Cues and Views for quite a few years now and a personal friend of mine. We have a lot of interests in common. Obviously he's a top class snooker player, I'm not. He's won quite a lot of prizes and some ranking points, I haven't. But the one thing that we do have in common is a passion for billiards and snooker, and a particular interest in old, collectible, antique billiards, cues and other memorabilia. Today I'm hoping to meet him across in Leeds, where should we get the opportunity, should time allow, we hope to discuss his favourite cues, the sort of desert island cues if you like, the cues that he would have in a collection if limited numbers was a necessity for him, the cues that he would select and the cues that he would treasure above all others. If you look on the Cues and Views website, you'll see many moons ago I wrote an article entitled The Essential Cue Collection. This article has received many comments over the years, and Dave Littleton also wrote a piece and illustrated it very nicely about the cues that he would save in case of fire, God forbid, the cue collector's nightmare, fire. But anyway, today we hope to get together with Dominic and discuss his favourite cues, and I'm looking forward to it. Welcome to Cues and Views, first on the web for collecting English billiard cues. It's a lovely sunny afternoon here in Leeds. We're just down the road from Craftsman Cues, so naturally when I get together with somebody as eminent as my colleague to my left, the topic naturally comes round to cues. I'd like to introduce Mr. Dominic Dale, part-time snooker historian, full-time snooker professional, two-time ranking tournament winner. Good afternoon, Dominic.
Hi, Dave.
Nice to see you again. Yeah, grand to see you. We were talking earlier on about if we had either some reason to have a limited budget, or we only had so much space for perhaps a few cues, what cues would they be? Which cues would we salvage in case of fire, or which cues would we have with us for either historical reasons or sentimental reasons? And I know you've been giving it some thought.
I have, yes, Dave. I mean, as you know, I've had a couple of major collections at different times of my snooker career, so I've actually owned a lot of these cues at different stages. And you know, I did give it a lot of thought on the way up here, and I mean, number one in any collection I think would be a first edition the old ash cue, with that sort of famous salty ash. It's sort of like a bronze colour, it's absolutely jet black, sort of almost, it's filthy, but it's actually salty ash. It would have been at sea at some point on a ship, and that's one of Burroughs and Watt's ideas. They're very rare and very valuable if and when they ever come up for sale. I think secondly would be, along the same lines, would be a first edition Burwell Champion cue with a sort of shorter, more purpley Indian rosewood style front splice. Robert Milkins used to play most of his career with one of those until recently. I like those, got a soft spot for those with the nice big wide yellow satinwood veneer, it's very pretty. Thirdly then, again these are very collectible Burroughs and Watts cues, and keeping in with the Burroughs and Watts theme, I mean everybody in a collection would want a Mannock. And my favourite Mannock really, Dave, would be the one with, it's a timber called Marblewood. It's sort of like a pinkish reddish colour with very seriously sort of zigzaggy striations in the grain. Not many people know what the timber is, but it's sort of a pinkish straw colour. And I like the Mannock that has the Feuerberg front splice on it. That's my favourite of all the different variations that we see in Mannocks. And then moving on from the Mannock, you've got the Burroughs and Watts Eureka cue, which again they also made with this marble wood, which is that straw coloured wood with a very variegated grain in it.
Because most people expect Mannocks and Eurekas to be made with a tulip wood secondary boat.
Absolutely, and that's because in the Burroughs and Watts teasers and the catalogues and pamphlets of the day, they advertise them as made from tulip wood, but they use a variety of different woods that had that sort of same sort of reddishness in them, just to look the same. You know, it's the same today. There are many embargoes and prohibitations, if there's a make-a-full word, on the import and export of different timbers from countries, and maybe at the time Burroughs and Watts weren't allowed to have tulip wood and other timbers imported into the country, so they use something else that they could readily purchase.
When we're looking at historical queues like the ones that you're talking about, sometimes the war years, in terms of the World Champion, for example, there were 2 world wars that happened during the production of that queue.
Absolutely.
And I think that influences the timbers that are available, and of course influences the way the queues look. And this is what we mean by first, second and third edition sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously during the war years, certain companies that were skilled in woodworking and a variety of different things were commissioned by the government to make rifle butts and things. Rileys did a lot of that in the First World War. Other cues that I like, I've got a soft spot for Newman 1274s.
Another Butters and Watts queue?
Yeah, lovely full Macassar ebony, but funnily enough the ones I see tend to have a very dark Macassar ebony with not too much distinction between the lovely the dark grain and the sort of paler background wood. But I haven't yet seen one really with the original lacquer on the butt that sort of protects that from so maybe, if there's someone who's got one out there, with the full lacquered butts, you might see a much more distinctive variation in the grain patterns, which you don't really see in the ones that we've seen very often. But it's one of my favourites because Tom Newman is a favourite player of mine.
So far we've talked mainly about your favourite Butters and Watts queues. Are there any other, as we would call them, famous makers that you admire the work of and you would want to put back one of their queues for yourself in the future years?
Well, Dave, as you know, Perrodon queues, they made hundreds of thousands of queues. Hard and fast rule to a degree, I suppose. Any queue that doesn't have Burroughs and Watts or Rileys on it is probably made by Perrodon. They made most of the Joe Davis queues, the Cannon Match queues, so many different queues. But another favourite player, I just mentioned Tom Newman. I like Claude Faulkner, a very artistic player, highly regarded in his day and introduced nursery cannons really to Walter Lindrum out in Australia in 1924. And Walter, of course, saw them as a potent scoring force and developed it to its nth degree. I like the early Faulkner queue, which has got normally a jet black ebony but with quite short fingers, and they're normally very solid queues. They're very good playable queues, and quite often they have a very small weight stamp, like just a number like a 17. But the badge is interesting. It just says facsimile queue at the top left-hand corner and the bottom right, and then diagonally across the centre of the badge you've got Claude Faulkner's signature.
Now I love that word facsimile, meaning effectively a copy of the queue that Claude Faulkner would be using at the time. Pretty much as modern players endorse queues and companies retain their services as a publicist in a sense. Really way back in the day when collectible queues were around, as we would say collectible now, when they were new, the name of the player that was on the badge would encourage sales, of course. And that is one of the loveliest, simplest, unfussy badges you could want. Absolutely. It tells you everything you need to know.
Absolutely, exactly. And I like that actually. The badge does intrigue me because it's not like any other really, as you mentioned. Riley is obviously a massive company. So many Riley queues around, and every now and again one comes up that you haven't seen before as a collector. They seem to make a variety of different badges. But my favourite Riley queue of all time has to be the Riley Ladies queue. Now that's a very interesting queue because it normally has a jet black ebony butt with a big trumpeting back to the butt. It really trumpets out. A little shield ivory badge. It's marine ivory. It's not like elephant ivory. Sort of inked in letters, sort of that sepia colour that you don't feel. It's not engraved as such. It just says E.J. Riley Accrington. But the great thing is in the middle of that butt section you've got maybe 10 inches of a beautiful emerald green velvet, and then at each end of that section are 2 ivory rings, almost like napkin rings. It's just a one-off and it's absolutely beautiful, utterly feminine. So these queues weren't really made at 58 inches. I used to have a mint one in my collection many years ago that was maybe 56 inches. I believe it's in Australia now, that queue. A wonderful thing, and I absolutely adored that.
And again, unique in
absolutely.
There's nothing else that looks quite like it. I've seen another ladies queue with a full snakewood book. Very attractive, but in a way, the feminine quality of the queue that you just mentioned sets it aside, doesn't it, from any other collectible queue, really?
I just wonder if the full snakewood butted one, it actually is a ladies queue. Maybe we're just misconstruing the fact that it could be a ladies queue because it has a shield badge.
Maybe so.
It's difficult to say, isn't it?
The reason that I would have thought it might be a ladies queue is that the ones I've seen, although they're from an era when queues were lighter anyway in weight, the ones I've seen have been quite lightweight.
And shorter,
and
maybe?
Yes, a little bit on the short side. So that's what's made me wonder if they are also ladies' shoes. But maybe not, you know, made in the same way. And of course, if you look at the velvet handle grip thing, that would obscure the snake wood.
Yes.
Perhaps that's why they chose not to put that on. But I'm not certain. And this is the beauty of talking to other collectors and other people who are interested. So we do compare notes and our views there.
Absolutely. Well, I've seen a large number of cues from a company that call themselves Phoenix Cues. I think that's a great name. They're doing Mark Williams cue range. They're making cues, all kinds of different splices and variations. Some of their cues have like 16 splices, but they still do the traditional ash and ebony ones, 3/4 ones in ash and ebony, ash and maple. They do the full gamut, and every cue I see from them is very well spliced. But really, what impresses me is some of the ash and some of the shafts of these cues are absolutely second to none. Pieces of ash and quality in terms of evenly spaced chevrons. You know, you just don't see in the UK. It's just some of the stuff that's second. And in China, they're very good British cues.
One of the things that I noticed, having had many a conversation about this type of thing with you, is it occurred to me that looking down a queue for 4, 5, 6 hours a day practicing, these things may seem to some people who are collecting badges essentially, or are collecting reputation. These things may seem overly finicky. However, if I was looking at something 4, 5, 6 hours a day and then wanted to earn my living with that, I think I'd want it to be just so.
Absolutely, but there are so many players that started the game young with a mediocre cue, I suppose, with a very poor to mediocre at best shaft, which has maybe 5 or 6 hours low down and nothing for about a foot, and then goodness knows what else at the rest of the shaft. And so, I mean, if a player, Mark Williams springs to mind. He used a machine splice barracuda called middle cue, quite a heavy cue and very reliable, very solid in the shaft. Decided to change. John Paris made him several cues to try out. He's currently playing with the John Paris cue. And what John does, he looks at your existing cue and tries to find a shaft that's similar. So if you ever look at Mark Williams playing on TV and you don't really rate the shaft much, it might have a cluster of arrows in the middle. It will just be simply that his old cue is the same. So that's what John Paris does. He finds the right piece of ash that matches your existing cue, the one that you want to change, and does his best to replicate it in all aspects, and that's fantastic service in my eyes.
Dominic, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
I've enjoyed it.
It's been great fun.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the piece that we've just shown you of myself interviewing Dominic Dale. And I've got to say a special thank you to Dominic for taking the time to sit and chat and reminisce about cues and other associated factors to do with the wider world of snooker. I must apologise for the sound quality of that piece. It's only the second outside piece that we've done, but thank you to Mr. eBay because soon some new microphones are coming along, and we hope that in future the pieces that we do will be much more easily followed by you people who view our pieces. Once again, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to speak again soon.